Do you remember back in June, I published this article with slides from a 2023 school board teacher PD professional development. It was the Waterloo District School Board, and it stated that the family was, or the nuclear family was a racist concept rooted in white supremacy. And afterwards, the board came out swinging. After my article on their Unpacking Whiteness training went viral, they issued statements saying my reporting was out of context. Let's recap. On June 4th, it all started when I published an article for True North on the Juno News platform. It covered a leak staff training session from the Waterloo District School Board. The session included a slide titled Dismantling Whiteness at WO, which claimed that the word family had been identified as harmful by racialized students. The slide said that the term implied obedience, hierarchy, and the prioritization of the nuclear family to the detriment of others. My article went viral. It really did strike a nerve with people, and the school board, which ignored my requests for comment before publication, suddenly had something to say, but not to me, of course. On June 6th, the Waterloo board issued a public statement claiming that my article lacked context. But here's the thing. I did actually ask for context. 3 times to date. I gave them every opportunity to clarify or to explain or even to refute the core of my argument made in the article, but they didn't. While all this was happening, I'd actually posted the entire slide deck on my X account. It's still a pinned post. They're not there anymore, which we'll get to, but if you want to see the slides, it is currently posted on my Substack. Okay. On June 10th, the Director of Education, Scott Miller, appeared on the Mike Farwell Show, a radio show on City News. I invited the director to come onto this show, onto Disrupted, but I haven't heard anything. On June 11th, the board chair, Meredith Radlin, appeared on CBC Radio for an interview. Well, me being me, I decided to submit some Freedom of Information requests, and the small fraction that actually did come back doesn't really look good for the board. Bear with me because today I'm going to walk you through those records, and we'll look at what the board told parents, and we'll look at what the board told the media and compare what they told with what they told each other. Now, I definitely have questions, and by the end of this episode, I suspect you might as well. I'm Melanie Bennett. This is Disrupted. When my article first broke, I reached out through all the proper channels. I sent requests for comment before publishing and given the reaction 2 after publishing, so 2 follow-ups. And honestly, I am used to being ghosted by school boards. And so far, I think it's only ever been 1 school board that's properly responded. And even then it was, there's nothing to see here sort of comment. So I honestly didn't think too hard about the Waterloo board's lack of response to me at the time. But reading through the documents I obtained, I was concerned about the relationship between certain media and the board. First, the comms officer handling the affair, Estefania, did politely decline Newsweek. Their request for comment received a polite response from Estefania. And that tells me that they could have easily politely declined my multiple requests for comment, but they chose not to. You know, it's just good manners to let someone know. And there were emails in this package showing that Estefania shared that I'd reached out with other board staff, right? So they were aware that I was reaching out. So why did no one ever respond to me? And I think there's other emails in this package, this communication FOI package, that hint at the possible explanation as to why they chose to ghost me specifically. Director Scott Miller's executive assistant Karen told the communication team that she and the director had had a discussion and they, quote, will not be responding, and that Heather from Comms, quote, supports this approach. So that's the same Heather who I saw copied multiple times on Estefania's emails and the ones that showed that I'd been communicating with them. So did the communications team had a little internal meeting saying don't talk to her? I don't know. And that was in response to a request for interview that I'd reached out to the director of education, Scott Miller. I was asking him to come onto my show, Disrupted, to talk about what he'd said on City News, but also to describe what he meant by my article is out of context, or I'd taken things out of context, because that's the thing that kept getting repeated all the time by the chair, by the director in their communications, this out of context. So I asked the director to come talk to me and explain to me how I was out of context. Anyway, they obviously didn't want to talk about that. And by that time, the chair of the board, Meredith Radlin, had also appeared on CBC Radio 1's morning show locally. So we'll get back to that in a minute. So let's talk about the Mike Farwell show. The documents show that Mike Farwell reached out, and I presume that might have been over the phone because I didn't see any emails, to, quote, offer an opportunity for the board to discuss, quote, the graphic. So that's referring to the actual slide that says families are racist, and, quote, help alleviate concerns from parents. Why is the media outlet positioning itself as the board's protector? Why do they need to alleviate? Why aren't they asking questions? Because typically the media is supposed to hold power to account. Anyway, I'll remind you, my article explains why the idea that the nuclear family could be racist tracks in education these days. And I'm not sure that Mike Farwell read my article. I mean, did he? If not, that's a rather incurious position to take before interviewing somebody who's supposed to be in a position of authority. Following what was a huge backlash over teacher training claiming that the nuclear family is a racist construct. So why would a journalist offer to reassure rather than get to the bottom of things? So to me, it seems that Farwell, even in the interview, completely uncritically let the director repeat this claim that my reporting was out of context. And Farwell asked for no context at all. The only context that the director provided was a list of strategies and policies like anti-oppression, human rights, anti-racism. But those really, when you dig down, actually support my reporting. It's even in the media brief that Estefania prepared for the director. So I would encourage you, go read my article. It's all there. I explain why these policies that the director brought up lead to training on why families could be considered racist under this, culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, which again is just critical theory in practice in an education setting. So under this understanding of the world, let's recap. The nuclear family can easily be conceptualized as a racialized power structure because in the minds of critical race theorists, the very idea of a nuclear family was invented by Europeans, and the Europeans imposed this idea on the world. And to them, if it's European, that means that it's racist, and that all racism, at least how they conceptualize that in their minds, and it's messed up, but we'll go here, must be, as they say, disrupted and dismantled. So disrupting and dismantling racism sounds great, but in this case, families are racist, ergo, the nuclear family must be dismantled for everyone to be liberated. I mean, this is all completely following the logic of critical race theory. So if I'm out of context, I would love to speak to the director to explain to me how I'm out of context. So if these slides reflect the ideological foundations of the training it's built on, why don't the journalists do their jobs? Why are they not asking these questions? Honestly, all the director did was confirm the central argument that I've been making in my reporting. That brings me to the CBC. Oh, the beloved CBC. How you provide me with endless entertainment and mirth. This local reporter, Kate Buchert, appears to have an interesting relationship with the board as well. She didn't go through the proper channels, the proper media channels. She emailed Estefania directly. So you remember Estefania as the comms point of contact. She seemed to be looking after this particular case. So Kate went straight to Estefania. She needed to go straight to Estefania. She reached out to arrange the chair's appearance on the CBC morning show. But as we'll see later, I don't know why Kate this. It seems to me that Kate's actually a reporter. And if she's not a reporter, this is all strange. I would urge you to, if you're curious, go back to part one, the episode back in June. Just have a listen of the clips from the chair's interview and the director's interview, because these journalists are not actually prodding them in any particular way. They really are reassuring the public. They're protecting the board. And I think it's pretty wild knowing what I know now. So who is Kate? Well, she turns out she's a CBC journalist. She's the one who wrote what feels like a hit piece about my reporting. And it really does feel like it was written and designed to discredit my work rather than engage in any level in good faith journalism. Despite showing a screenshot of my article with my name clearly visible as the author, it's right there, Kate never reached out to me. I reached out to everyone that I thought was important for my article, right? As the author of my article, she never reached out. And I note that the article was last edited June 13th, and I'm pretty sure by then I'd already made a complaint that she hadn't reached out to me, and the article was full of misinformation. And from what I can tell, all that same misinformation is still in the article unchanged. And for some reason, Kate starts by mentioning Rebel News's video reaction to my work. So I'm not really sure what Rebel's video reaction to my article has anything to do with my work. She also repeats this idea that it doesn't have any context. There's a lack of context. And then proceeds to say the wildest stuff that has nothing to do with anything I wrote, like at all. So first, Kate interviews this religious studies academic, I guess, scholar as an expert. She's from Alberta, not even from Ontario. It suggests that the parental rights movement, at some sort of nefarious, I guess, undefined blob or force, is behind the article, okay? So weirdly, she brings up also gender ideology. Like, what? I never talked about gender ideology. This is an article that's completely explaining why critical race theory is behind a lot of this thinking. Nothing to do with gender ideology. And so here's a choice quote from Kate's article. Lisa Gasson-Gardner, so that's the academic that Kate interviewed, says, grassroots groups who are part of the movement know how to communicate. They say things that seem obviously true, like parents should be informed about what their children are learning about in school. But then there's this underlying message that the average reader might miss. Well, first of all, if you're saying I'm doing this as the nefarious parental rights movement and I know how to communicate, I guess I'll take that as a compliment. but which parental rights activists is she even talking about? Like I said, Kate never reached out to me to ask any of these questions at all. She's just making that claim out there. Then she writes, quote, Gasson-Gardner says parental rights groups are good at mobilizing, and she's seen evidence that they've worked to get people elected to school boards in Alberta, in Ontario. What does this have to do with anything that I wrote? At all. Like, at all. Kate clearly did read my article, though, because she brings in another academic from the University of Waterloo to reassure the people reading about critical race theory. Now, all I did in my reporting was to explain why certain elements of critical race theory track with this framing, that the nuclear family is a harmful concept to racialize people, right? Or can be viewed that way. So again, go read my article. It's all kind of laid out there. Kate's academic, though, is saying that my analysis of critical race theory is, quote, a moral panic. But aren't the CBC supposed to be unbiased? Isn't that what we're being told all the time? So why, if she is unbiased, didn't she, one, reach out to me, or two, even accurately reflect anything that I actually said in my article? Even the academics she brought in as experts completely failed to address any of the points that I raised. So again, did those academics read it? Like, what was the point of this article? One interesting thing that Kate did say is that the school board told her that the presentation was prepared by school board staff. So let's examine that claim. Laura May Lindo. That name was suddenly thrust center stage almost immediately after my article was published. Aside from Laura's name appearing in the article when I was referencing culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, I didn't much focus on her other than quoting her. There was a slide, but the slide wasn't screenshotted in the article. It was part of the package, wasn't in the article. So why was the board suddenly making Laura May Lindo part of the conversation? Not just part of the conversation, almost central to it. And it turns out that the documents that I have reveal everything. So let's have a tiny recap of the chair, Meredith Radlin, making a statement at a board meeting last spring.
I would like to express regret for the racist hate mail directed at Dr. Laura May Lindo. She was not involved in the PD session reference, but a slide from a presentation she had done in another session was included.
First of all, that's horrible. And if people out there are sending hate mail, don't do that. I would never send anyone hate mail, let alone racist hate mail. So just don't do that. But let's get back to the story. The chair said that the slide was in the article, but it wasn't. She said it was placed amongst other slides prepared by board educators, except the actual slide, which I'm sharing with you now, I hadn't previously shared, looks exactly the same as the others. Did the chair even read my article at all? Did Laura May Lindo read my article? Because regardless, Laura wrote an email to the trustees and the director a few days after publication of the article. And Laura said, quote, in November 2023, by the way, that's the date of the slides, I was asked to conduct a professional development session with a focus on culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. I was asked to share my slides, which I did willingly. So here she is. Here is Laura saying, I made that. You guys, not only did I make those slides, the board, you guys asked me to create these slides. You guys asked me to deliver this training that I produced. Okay, so she's writing to the board to say this. So who wrote it? Who wrote this professional development? Was it the school board staff? Was it Laura May Lindo? Because Laura seems to really think that it's her. And surely she would recognize her own work. Now, like I said, the screenshot of her slide wasn't in the article. Others were, which had the same style. And she's writing to the school board going, guys, you asked me to do this, and why is it made public in an article? What's going on here? The thing I don't understand is that we know at least 3 different parties were involved somehow. You have the board, educators. Well, that's the claim from Meredith Radlin. Then somehow the OSSTF, which I believe I even contacted at the time, their branding was on the slides. And then you have Laura May Lindo, who's writing to the board saying, guys, you asked me to do this. What's going on? So if it wasn't her, why is there this panic from the board? And she even got like a personal response from the director of education apologizing to her. So weirdly, why would she receive hate mail because of a brief mention in my article that literally doesn't have her name's there, but it's not a slide. So let me share you exactly the quote from the article that mentions her. This is the quote. Quoting from Culturally Relevant Pedagogy by Laura May Lindo, one slide states that biases are the socialized teachings of the white culture, and we use keywords and phrases to promote the dominant culture. So nothing makes sense here. We still haven't heard anything from any of them at all that explains why they believe the nuclear family is a racist construct. And if they don't believe that, why they let that training happen and why they're personally apologizing to Laura, who appears to be the author. Like I said, nothing makes sense. But ultimately, why does a journalist like me, for example, need to go through all of this rigmarole to get the most basic of facts and still not find much clarity, all for something that should be readily available for any parent to look at? I want to end on this. It appears that the board are going to do their very best not to release the slides. I requested the full deck of slides immediately after this whole thing happened, but it looks like they're denying full access just completely. And so I'm not exactly sure why, though, because they've already promised to release the slides. Let's just watch this clip. So this is Trustee Cindy Watson from the Waterloo District School Board, Waterloo Region District School Board. And this is their last board meeting, November 5th board meeting.
So I'll just start, mine's shorter. Whereas the professional development Dismantling Whiteness at WO has many parents upset and confused. And whereas trustees were assured in the past that the tenets of critical race theory were not being taught in WRDSB schools. And whereas many concerned parents want transparency and accountability, and whereas there wasn't broad consultation for the anti-racism policy, Therefore, be it resolved that the trustees be provided with a written report early in 2025-26 school year that would provide full context and information about the professional development dismantling whiteness at WO school, as well as next steps, and that the anti-racism policy currently being developed be released to parent councils for broader consultation.
So I don't typically make the story about me and my reporting, but the behavior of this board and the trustees of this board is just too strange. I really believe that this is much, much more than local drama. This is a story about the problems with very concerning relationships between state-funded media and what are essentially government institutions. So the system's in place to hold government bodies to account. So those would be, in this case, this is the school board, right? The trustees, they're there to hold the school board to account. They're supposed to represent people. But it appears that the trustees, headed by the chair, are protecting the government body and aligning with it rather than holding them to account. They're not actually responding to the concerns of the public at all here. And then the journalists who should be curious, they've completely failed in their number one job, which is to be curious and ask difficult questions. Journalists should be holding elected officials like trustees to account. They should be holding government institutions like school boards to account. But instead, as the CBC did, they're doing hit pieces on the journalist who's actually doing that job. They're not getting to the bottom of anything. They're not asking any critical questions. So I don't know what's going to happen. I suspect there's going to be a part 3, maybe even in 6 months from now. So hold tight. We're going to get to the bottom of this story, and we're going to bring it straight to you. So for True North, I'm Melanie Bennett.